Okay, so we're going to go through some troubleshooting on the gun and hose and anything leaking for use with the Quinn canister system. There's normally 4 points that we're going to go through and check and troubleshoot and see if there's any corrective actions that we can get you back on the road and running smoothly. So what they are is your spray tip and the cleanliness, the connection with the hose, and then these two nuts here. So these two nuts here, the hose connection and the spray tip, and we'll go through those step by step, one at a time, and have a look at what we've got going on and fix it from there. So first up, we want to see, is it leaking out the front? Is it clogged at the gun spray tip? And we'll go through how to fix that. So what we want to do is, when we're working on cleaning a gun and hose, if we've got a leaky one, we want to ensure that this chrome wheel here is locked against the trigger so that the trigger can't be operational, because we are going to be working with the front of this gun and the tip, and we don't want to be covered in adhesive. So what we're going to do, we're going to open this up here, and we're going to take the spray tip off and this nut. Okay, and what we want to do is, you want to ensure that we can see through the spray tip, and if not, we can soak it in some cleaner or thinners. And then also what we want to make sure is that when we've got it closed like this, we want to ensure that we can see this little needle poking through the front of this nut here, and that's ensuring that the needle, and it's a needle and seat that operates this gun. I need to ensure this needle's sitting in the seat properly to make sure it's sealed. So we want to ensure that's all clean, and then we can reassemble this. We wind this on, and then when we're setting it up again, we want to line this up for whichever way our fan pattern is going to spray. So if we go just a little bit off top dead center there, and then when we tighten this up with the spanner, then that will straighten up like that. Okay, the next point that we want to investigate for anything leaking is, we want to make sure this connection here with the hose and the gun is tight. So as you can see here, with this hose, the fitting on this hose can spin and it can move up and down just a little bit. Okay, so when that is tightened correctly, that will no longer move. So I'll just show you here. So inside these two things, you've got the fittings there. You've got some chamfers, because they're a hydraulic fitting and they fit inside each other, and then they'll create a perfect seal. Now, if this is not tightened correctly, the glue can leak around the inside of this collar and out the side there, and it could look like you've got a hose that's no longer working correctly or leaking, but it's actually because this fitting is not tight enough. So we'll go through a demonstration of how to ensure that's tight. So we'll thread this on here, and as you can see, this still moves around and swivels. We want to keep going up until that is now pulled firm, and then we'll tighten it up with this spanner. Okay, that no longer freely rotates, and that will create a great seal, and you will not have any leaking from the hose at that point there. The same goes for the connection to the canister. So it's no longer freely rotating, and it's firm and pulled in tight, so you don't have any glue going down beside the connection and out the side there. Okay, so that's the ways we want to make sure that's tight and firm, and we'll go from there, and now we'll step into the other two fittings. Okay, so as I said, when we're working on our gun and that, we want to ensure this locking nut's tight against the trigger, so we can ensure that we don't get covered in adhesive. But in this instance, I'm going to undo the nut because it's not connected to anything, and I can give you some demonstrations of what happens when some of these nuts come loose. Okay, so what we got here, if we just open this so we can operate the trigger. So that's operating there. So this nut here, this back nut here, over time that can wind its way forward on this threaded rod, and as you can see, that's now touching the front. Actually, just take this tip back off and I'll show you something here. Okay, as we were talking about earlier, we can see this needle is sitting through there, which is sitting correctly in the seat. Now when we operate the trigger, that pulls that needle out of the seat. Okay, now what we can see there is that's still closing fine. If that nut winds its way too far forward, that will hit this back of this nut here before this will close. So therefore it's now not seating correctly and it's not sealing. So even after you've sprayed, that will continue to dribble out the front. And we need to ensure that this nut here is back finger tight against the trigger, because if we do it with a spanner, we may snap this rod. So we just want to make sure it's finger tight, and now that allows the rod to move backwards and forward freely without binding on the back of that nut, and it will create a good seal. Now sometimes if that's happened and we have had a leak coming out the front here because of that nut hitting, what we need to do is we need to finger tight it back against the trigger, and then we may need to spray for 30 seconds or so without a spray tip on there into a box or something like that, because there could be some build up in there which will stop the needle seating properly. Okay, so that's that one done. And then the last point, or number 4, is this nut here, which goes into the back of the nozzle area. Now what happens there is that is a nut with a shank on the front of it and a dome, and then that needs to be tightened on to a little seal in there which will tighten around the pin. And if it becomes too loose, what will happen is you'll start to get some glue leaking around this pin because it's not sealing around that pin. So all we want to do there is we want to tighten up that with the spanner just till it's firm, because what will happen, that will crush down on the seal and tighten around the pin and stop it leaking around that point. Now if we get overzealous and we go too tight on that, I'll give you an example of that. That'll now bind on that pin and the trigger will stay stuck open when we let go. See, I actually have to force the trigger back now because it's too tight. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to nip it up till it's firm, but not over tighten it, so it can still move freely, and the spring can still close on the trigger and ensure that we get a good seal here. Okay, so that's your 4 pointers for fixing a leaking gun. Okay, so yeah, just a summary on the 4 points or the 4 tips to troubleshoot a leaking gun and what we need to look out for. So we want to make sure our spray tip is clean and firmly tightened on. We want to ensure that our needle and seat here is clean also. We want to ensure that the hose here is firmly tightened and not rotating. We want to ensure that this little nut here is finger tight back against the trigger, and we want to make sure this shank nut at the front is firmly tightened but not over tightened so it doesn't bind on the pin and the trigger can still operate smoothly.